Dr. Carson doesn't commit gaffes. He gets a grasp of the issues, particularly foreign policy and issues were not necessarily his own, and surround himself with the right advice and continues to listen to the American people, going where they are instead of being defined and redefined by the mainstream and other media.
Armstrong Williams, longtime advisor to Dr. Ben Carson, on this program last night, explaining why he believes the good doctor would make an outstanding president. Dr. Ben is defying the odds so far, as he's among the top candidates in several polls. Take a look at the latest poll from Fox News. Scott Walker and Jeb Bush tied at 12%, but who's in second place? Why, it's Dr. Carson at 11%. Let's talk about that now with our panel. Joining us via Skype from Las Vegas, Megan Barth, political commentator and founder of ReaganBaby.com, and also Skyping in, but from the nation's capital, our friend who leans a bit leftward, David Goodfriend, former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton. Megan, first to you. Dr. Carson, why is he resonating so well with voters?
I think he's resonating so well because the voters are quite tired of the political class in Washington, who seem to be so concerned about holding on to their own power, whereby they'll even sacrifice their principles. I think the voters are looking for a change, and we see this in the last landslide election that we handed the GOP, and the GOP is still not acting upon that action. So I think voters are really looking for someone outside the Beltway to start making some significant reforms that we need, and Dr. Ben Carson just might be the diagnostician that the country needs to really right the wrongs and reduce the growth of government.
David Goodfriend, you are one of those folks inside the Beltway, no pejorative meant there, and you have a little different look at politics. What do you think of Dr. Carson?
Well, just imagine that I said to you and to your audience that the next president of the United States will be Bernie Sanders, and I can already hear people's heads exploding. I mean, that's the same reaction you get from Democrats when you actually say, look, Ben Carson could be president, or, you know, some of the more conservative, right-leaning Republicans that are running right now. It's a long shot precisely because in a general election setting, the positions and the history of a lot of these far right-wing candidates are anathema to the vast majority of Americans. But in a primary setting, in a place like the Republican primary in Iowa or New Hampshire, where there's a very, very crowded field and nobody's even close to 51%, a small plurality can make a candidate stand out. I think what it will do is simply prolong the bleeding on the Republican side.
All right. It's very interesting. It's just one thing, Megan, and then I'm going to switch topics. Isn't it interesting how Dr. Carson, according to David Goodfriend, is like a right-wing extremist in the mode that Bernie Sanders is on the left? That's just more than passing curious to me.
Yeah, we've got an old white socialist that doesn't even run as a Democrat. He runs as an independent. So he can't even claim the Democrat symbol as his party. Yet we have Dr. Ben Carson, who actually has run one of the largest educational foundations in the country, and a pediatric neurosurgeon. So yeah, he doesn't have the political clout and, you know, that maybe Bernie Sanders has as an independent, but he might bring some fresh ideas to a place like the Beltway that has grown very stale.
All right. Now, David, I'm going to switch topics and really switch candidates, and that is because today, former Texas Governor Rick Perry got back into the race for 2016 after some challenges in 2012. A lot of candidates weren't successful the first time around. Does Perry have an opportunity, in your opinion, David?
Well, certainly he has an opportunity, but again, you have a very, very crowded Republican field right now and no clear front runner, so any of them have an opportunity. I think what Governor Perry faces is akin to what a lot of the Republicans face, and that is in order to win the Republican nomination, they're taking positions that are way, way, way to the right of where mainstream America, where most American voters sit. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. You know, Rick Perry has stated his position on abortion. That's out of line with what most Americans say on abortion. He stated his opinions on immigration, again, out of line with where the majority of Americans are. And I think he's going to do well in the Republican primary. I really do. But the problem the Republican Party has that you witnessed in the last two presidential elections is that the attitudes and demographics of the country are changing, and the Republican Party is not keeping up with them. So
all right,
that's the bigger question.
Duly noted. I hear you, David. 30 seconds remain. The 30 seconds belong to you, Megan. Your take on Rick Perry.
Well, what David says, simply that the country is shifting and belief or ideology, is simply not true. Look at the last midterm election. It was the largest sweep that in modern history. I think you have to go back to the early 1900s of how many seats we handed the GOP. So to Governor Rick Perry, what he needs to do is come out first and say, you know what, folks, I wasn't ready physically or mentally the last time I ran for president. He had just come off back surgery. He made some mistakes. His mind was cloudy.
We will have to leave it there. Megan, Barth, tonight in California instead of Vegas, and David Goodfriend from Washington. Thank you both.